I'm starting with the apples today, and what you want is some really nice sweet apples. Something like a Braeburn, that's what I'm using here today, or maybe a Pink Lady. Now, who wants to have lots of extra work? I certainly don't. So what I do here is I actually make a big batch of apples, and then I freeze the ones I don't want, and I use them in future cakes. And that just saves me a bit of time and effort. So once you have peeled your apples, you can then chop them up. And I'm going to be using this little Lakeland device, which saves a lot of time and effort. You just push it down, and then that's going to take the core out, which you can throw away, and you get some wedges. They're not perfect. You do get little bits and pieces in them, but you can just remove these with your knife. So chop them all up and peel them all, and as I said, I'm using 9 apples today, and I think I get about 6 cakes out of that. But if you can't even be bothered with doing this, you can buy a commercial one that you just buy out the shops, an apple sauce that you buy out the shops. If we're going for sugar-free, just be a little bit careful, because obviously some of them might contain sugar, but it's up to you, and a little bit of sugar is okay anyway. Pop them in a pan, put the temperature up, and then add some water, maybe about 4 or 5 tablespoons of water. Bring that up to the boil. And when it's boiling, you can just pop on the lid, put the temperature down, and let that simmer for about 10 minutes. Everything with this cake is a bit about. After about 10 minutes, you'll find that you can mush them up with a fork. They're nice and soft, and there's still a little bit of liquid in there, and that's just going to add to the moisture of the cake. So mush them up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take about 3 tablespoons of the mixture, separate it off, and then I'm just going to leave the rest in the pan to cool down, and I'm going to freeze it later on. That's my first wet ingredient. Then my next one is vanilla extract, followed by olive oil, about a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And actually, it doesn't have to be olive oil, it can be any oil, and you need about 3 tablespoons. Next, I'm going to do my sugar substitute, and I'm using dates, 8 dates, and I'm just going to cover them with water, and then I'm going to put them in the microwave. You get 8 slices of this cake, so if you're counting calories or whatever, it's 1 date per slice. I've actually added a little bit too much water here, I think, but I'm going to put it on to high for 3 minutes and then just see what it looks like. But as I said, I think this is a little bit watery. It won't matter too much, but you don't want to well, let's have a look at it and see what it looks like. Yeah. You see, that's just a little bit too watery. So I'm going to put this in for another minute, and just so that some of that water can evaporate off. So in the microwave for 1 more minute. As I said, with this cake, the proportions should be roughly right, but it doesn't really matter if it's not too exact. It just means your cake might have a little bit more moisture in it. And let's have a look at it now. Yeah, that's a marginally better. I could go in for another minute, but I think I'm just going to use this. So the next step is to just squish that up with a fork. Just keep going until you get it into a nice paste. And don't worry if there are any little brown bits in it at the end. That's perfectly okay. Now moving on to my dry ingredients, and I need to put in 1 cupful of dry ingredients, and I'm using half gluten-free flour and half ground almonds. You can put whatever proportion you want in, as long as it's about a cup. And again, you can use self-raising flour or just normal plain flour if you want. I had to grind up my own almonds today, and that's why they're in. Oh, I've forgotten an ingredient. I've forgotten the baking powder. Normally I put the flour in and then I put 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder in, and I give that a little mix through. Ground almonds I'm using today, I've had to grind them myself because somebody's husband used the commercial ones that you buy in the shop. And we've also found that we can't get ground almonds as much. They're not always in the shop. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. So if you don't have the ground ones and you've only got almonds, you can grind them up, but they don't come out just as well as the ones that you buy already ground up. You can give that a little mix in. If you're really a perfectionist, you can mix it in a separate bowl, but I tend to just give it a little mix, and that's fine. I'm moving on to flavourings. Now today I'm making a lemon cake, a lemon drizzle cake, and they are absolutely delicious. What makes them so special is the beautiful flavouring from the lemon rind. Lemon rind holds so much flavour, much more than the actual juice of the lemon. I will be using the juice of the lemon, but I won't be using it until later on. And I'll show you that later. So I'm just going to grate off the rind. That's just the yellow of the lemon that you want. Don't go any further than that. But this cake, you can use any flavourings you like. I have a few ideas. One of the ones that I like is some carrots, maybe about 1 large carrot, 2 small carrots, grated up, along with a few raisins and maybe a few cashew nuts and a teaspoon of spice. That's a really nice carrot cake. Another one is blueberry. I quite often put pineapple in the cake. Chocolate, who doesn't love a chocolate cake? And one of my favourite ones that I'm beginning to really like a lot more is pistachio and lemon. So I haven't got pistachios in this cake that I'm making today, but pistachios are a really nice addition to it. And what else can you... Oh, banana. A mushed up banana with some walnuts makes a nice date and walnut cake. And instead of putting it in a round tin, as I'm about to do, you could just put that in, make it a sort of loaf if you wanted to. So this cake, you can do anything you want. Just use your imagination. I've heard that courgette is nice in cakes. I've never tried it, but hey ho, why don't you give that one a go? Now let's talk cake tin. I'm going to line my cake tin, and the first thing I do is I take a big square of grease-proof paper, and then I'm going to I'm going to fold that in half diagonally, so I've got a really big triangle. And after I've done that, I'm going to take that big triangle and I'm going to fold it in half again to make a smaller triangle. Now, where my left hand is, I'm going to call that the pointy bit. So fold it in half, and keeping my finger on the pointy bit, I'm going to fold that in half again. And then I'm going to fold it in half again. So I now have a wedge shape. I'm going to hold the pointy bit into the middle of my cake tin, mark the edge of my cake tin, and then just cut in a slight circle, and lo and behold, you open it up and you have the bottom of your cake tin. You've also got some scrappy extra bits. Do not throw them out. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to put some olive oil. I'm just going to spray some olive oil into the cake tin, and then I'm going to smoosh that about with my finger. Now the reason we do this is just to make it a little bit slimy, so that my greaseproof paper is going to stick to it. You can use butter for this if you want, anything just to make it a bit sticky, because the last thing you want is for your greaseproof paper to fall in on top of your cake. Ugh, what a mess. So make it a bit slimy, and then the first thing you can do is just press down the bottom part, the circle, and you sometimes get air bubbles, so just push them out, and then you can get the scrappy bits which you didn't throw out, and you can cut that into strips. You can use one big strip. This is going to go around the edges. You can use one big strip, or I actually prefer to use smaller strips and just place them around the edge, and that will be your cake tin finished. So what have we talked about so far? We've talked ingredients, our wet ingredients, the apples, the olive oil and the vanilla extract. We've talked about our dry ingredients, a cup of flour and ground almonds. And we've talked about our sugar substitute, the dates. We've also talked about flavours, and today I'm doing a lemon cake, but you do whatever cake you want. The most important thing is, after you've got your cake, do not forget to put your oven on, and it's 180 degrees. Now we are ready to start our cake, and we need 2 eggs, and we also need a whisk. So break 2 eggs into a bowl. You can use a hand whisk as I'm using, or you can put it into like a mixer, like a Kenwood mixer, something like that, with your whisk. And you're going to whisk this for approximately 1 minute. It's just got to be frothy, but it won't be stiff, and it hasn't really got going yet. Now, I've just realised something. I'm using a granite worktop today, and it's better if you do this on a slightly softer setting, so I'm just going to put a mat under that. That just helps to keep the air in, because one of our magic ingredients is air, and you need a lot of that. I'm going to put the date paste in now, and then I'm going to carry on whisking this. So you whisk it for about a minute with just on its own, 2 eggs on their own, and then you add the date paste, and don't worry if you get little bits of date from the skin and so on. That's not a problem at all. And also, this might look quite brown, but as you actually whisk this, just like magic, it's actually going to be much paler. And so this whisking is going to take about 3 to 4 minutes, and it should at least double in volume. It will never go stiff. This is not like meringue, so don't try to make it go any stiffer. It should be pale, and if you've been whisking it for 3 or so minutes, it'll be absolutely fine. This is what it'll look like. It's nice and frothy, and we're ready now to put in the next ingredient. So I'm going to start off with the wet ingredients, and if you remember what they are the oil, 3 tablespoons approximately, or a good glug. You can put a little bit less in if you don't want to put as much as that oil in. Then we've got a teaspoonful of our vanilla extract going in. Give it a good shake first, remember. I'm not even using a teaspoon here, I'm just doing what I think is about right. It's up to you. And then the final dried ingredient, of course, was these beautiful apples that we made earlier on that have been cooling down on the side for a while, and now they're ready to use. Don't put them in if they're still hot. And I'm just going to give that a little whisk. It doesn't take much, just a few seconds to mix all those ingredients in. And then I'm going to be ready to add my dried ingredients, and I'm going to add them in 2 lots. I'm going to add half first and then the other half, and I'll just shove this in any old way, really. But if you're being really pedantic about it, you can mix them in a separate bowl first so that they're all mixed together. Before I start to whisk it, I give it a little stir. That's just to make everything wet so that it doesn't kind of spurt up, because sometimes your flour can go everywhere if you're not careful. Well, that's just extra mess to clear up. Who wants that? So that's the second half of the dried ingredients going in, and you're not really whisking this much at all, just a few seconds to make sure that's all mixed in. The last ingredient that is going to go in is your flavouring, and in this case it's just some lemon juice, some lemon rind, but put in whatever you want. This lemon isn't going to take much to stir in, but if you've got more bulky ingredients it might take a bit longer, so make sure you get all that lovely lemon and don't waste any if you can help it. And then just give that a little whiz round. And that is pretty much, when that's mixed in, that is your cake ready to be put in the cake tin. And obviously you don't want to waste anything, so after I've whisked it, I'm just going to take out the blades. And now don't bang it on the side of your bowl, because if you do that, you're going to drop some of the air that you've just spent ages putting in. So try to avoid that if you can, because as I said earlier on, air is one of the biggest ingredients in this cake. When you've done that, you're then ready just to pour this mixture into your cake tin. It'll probably take a couple of inches. As I said earlier on, if you want to make it into something like cupcakes or a loaf tin, you can do that as well. If you make it into cupcakes, I've done that before, your cooking time is going to be a little bit less, probably about half. So in it all goes. And then you're ready just to put that into the oven at 180 degrees. And the most important thing is that you now go and get a timing device, such as your timer on your phone, 35 minutes. After 35 minutes, your cake will be ready. And you can just leave that on the worktop or the top of the cooker for a little while till it cools down, and then you can turn it upside down and it'll be ready. So here I am just squeezing my lemons out because I'm now going to make my topping. Now let's talk toppings. Unfortunately, due to the chemotherapy that my husband's had, he is no longer able to tolerate dairy products. Otherwise, my favourite topping is actually cream cheese, mascarpone, and mascarpone cheese mixed together. However, we can't do that anymore, so I'm making a lemon drizzle for this. Sometimes I use pineapple in my cake. I make a pineapple upside down cake, and I use the juice from the can of pineapples as well. So you're going to squeeze all that out. Again, with the toppings, you can get quite creative because there's other toppings you can use. If you're not too bothered about the sugar content, you could put some icing sugar on top of it. Other toppings would be maybe cream if you're not bothered about dairy. So just, again, a bit like the flavours in the cake, you decide what you want to put on your topping. If you're going to use this glaze, squeeze out the juice from the lemons, I'm putting them into a mug, and I'm adding a small teaspoon, or maybe half a teaspoon, of corn flour to that. Obviously, no gluten in it. You could use normal flour if you wanted to, but corn flour is better. And I'm just to save myself on washing up in a pan, I'm just going to put that in the microwave. You can see it's a little bit cloudy, a little bit milky looking. I'm going to put that in the microwave. I'm not sure how long for, so I'm going to put it in for a minute and a half. But I'm going to look at it after about 45 seconds just to see what it looks like. And if it's not set, I can put it in a bit longer, but it looks good. You can see it's gone a bit yellowy, a bit clearer, and a little bit jelly-like, or it's beginning to set. That will set, that's fine, that's ready. That will set hard in the fridge, or even if you don't put it in the fridge, if you just leave it on the side, that will go into a nice sort of firm kind of jelly-like substance. So I'm going to pour that over my cake, the cake which I have just turned out, and that's the bottom of the cake, onto a plate. And you can just spread that on with a knife, and if you really want to, then you can, and if you've got enough, you can make that go down to the sides of the cake. And that's just a really nice lemony flavour that you'll get when you're eating the edges of the cake. So that is my cake finished. It's ready to be cut up and served. As I said, it hasn't really... Yeah, this cake didn't really rise up as much as I would have liked, and it was a little bit dense, and I think that's because of the almonds that I used. I would definitely get the ones that you buy in the shop already ground up, unless they're not available, because it's okay in an emergency. I hope you enjoyed this little video, and I hope you'll enjoy making this cake. I would say that once you have your apples done, this cake probably takes about 15 to 20 minutes to prepare, takes 30 to 35 minutes to cook, and it could take all of 10 minutes to eat. Happy baking!